Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm your boy, Retro Bliss, and you are on Retro Bliss Rewind. Welcome to the program. If you're watching from Mike's Gaming Gala, we're simulcasting over there as well. Welcome from you guys over there as well. And so we're just going to bring you guys on. We're going to talk about the controllers from BD RetroMods. So let's just bring everybody on. Mike from Mike's Gaming Gala and Brian himself. Yeah. And not to be outdone, Casey, the Intellivision gamer. What's going on, guys?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
You know, Brian has been a regular panelist since we've started the podcast. And we've talked about doing this episode almost from the very beginning. And we just had kicked the can down the road way too long. And it was just time.
Well, it's fine too, because like we talked, it was like, but Phil, I'm a co-host. Like, does it make sense? But
it makes plenty of sense, man.
So
yeah, if you can't pimp your own product on your own show, what are we doing?
All right. Well, I want to start this off because I met Brian at Korg's 3 years ago. It was my first gaming convention ever. And I was looking around and I saw his table and I saw all these controllers there. Of course, his spread then wasn't nearly what it was this year, no. But I digress. And I was looking for a controller for my master system because the controller I had was failing, wasn't doing well. And I saw this. Well, now I can't even get the cord. I saw this. And I asked him about it, and he explained to me what it was, and I bought one. And so we just kind of struck up a conversation, and he was telling me about why he was making controllers. He says, I'm not really making a lot of money at it. I just want to kind of keep retro gaming alive. That was kind of his thing at the time. I'll let you tell him what's going on now. That's up to him. But and so I've developed as you know, a very, very good friendship with Brian since then, and empty pocketbook because I bought quite a number of controllers since then. Now, this past year at Korg's, I actually went up there at Torg's this past year. I was at Torg's kind of helping him out a little bit. So I thought, well, I'll help him out at Torg's. Well, or at Korg's this year. So I went up to Korg's. Well, I got busy walking around and networking and stuff. I really didn't get a chance. But once I did get to his table, he had to take care of some business. So he asked if I would watch the table. And if you guys remember Daryl Ginther from a couple weeks ago, from the Atari 7800 programmer, he programmed Popeye. He was on the program. He was there, and I thought, man, this is a great opportunity for me to get to know Daryl, right? Wrong. I didn't get a chance. People kept wanting to buy controllers. I know I sold at least a couple $100 worth of controllers, not to mention all the times in between that people were asking questions about them. And he had left some laminated sheets of what the controllers were costing and whatnot. And I was scrambling. Okay, which controller were you looking at now? And I'm looking, because I'm an old dude, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And it was something to behold, and it was pretty cool. So anyway, I asked Casey to come on, and Casey and I are probably, I don't know if we are, but we've got to be two of Brian's better customers. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I'm probably two of the better YouTube customers. I'm sure there's a lot of people who've got big collections of BD RetroMods controllers.
I was going to say that, yeah, there's a couple that at every show they buy multiple, and I mean they yeah, I'm not gonna put their names out there, but yeah, they would definitely
because their wives would kill them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but yeah, they could easily put a shelf of stuff on top of it. So, and again, it's great. I mean, I appreciate that, because again, they like what I do and they want to support it every time, and I appreciate them doing that. So
I will say, I mean, so I only own one, I know I am like the noob of BD RetroMods controllers, but I will say, and despite the fact that we're kind of going to go through systems more chronologically, like if there's ever a system that you don't like, that Brian saved the ColecoVision for me. I hate that controller with a passion, to the point that I wasn't reviewing ColecoVision homebrews because I hate that controller so much. And this saved the ColecoVision for me. So, I mean,
I have Model A.
Yeah,
Mike.
Mike has the new model because
yeah. But this still works great. So, but anyway, what I would like is for Brian to kind of kickstart the program and tell us what got you started, and how your company evolved, and what's going on now, and maybe you can show us some of your wares.
Yeah, sure. So, and some of you might have already heard this before, but what kind of got me into this was really probably about somewhere between 6-7 years ago. I really started to get back into retro gaming, like collecting a lot of the old consoles and games, because prior to that I was doing like emulation and stuff, but I really wanted that original stuff again. And at that time I was also into Magic the Gathering, and I was at a card shop to try to look for some cards for a deck I was making. And they had a master system there, and it was complete in box, had 2 games, 3D glasses, the zapper with it, light phaser. Zapper's the NES, but the light phaser and like the arcade, the control stick with it. And they didn't have any price tag on it, and I just kind of asked them, I'm like, hey, I see this here, what are you guys selling this for? And they're like, $50 okay? And I'm just like, sure. And picked it up, cleaned it all up, and
you said sure as you stole it and walk away.
Yeah, right. I mean, now granted, things were cheaper then, than what they are now. But even at that, like, you wouldn't, like, that price for what was there was just like, okay, I'm not even gonna question that.
Complain.
Here you go, and off I go. And but then, as COVID kind of came around, because I said I played with it some, but during COVID, when we were all kind of stuck at home, I started to really get into it more. And one of the things is just like, again, especially coming from the NES first, I really did not like the controllers that came with it, and especially the control stick. I mean, the control stick,
piece of garbage that is.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is just bad on all levels. Now, again, for those that like it, more power to you. But for me personally, I do not like this at all. And
it was awkward using your right hand.
Yes, I mean, exactly. Like, I didn't like having to use my right hand for it. Now, some people
it feels like a stick shift too.
Right, right. Like, yeah, like if I'm playing Outrun, that might be okay. But beyond that, it's just, going left and right with that. It was just, I'm not sure what they were thinking with this, but ultimately, I like using joystick controllers, especially when I'm playing like shmups and stuff. And I was getting kind of frustrated there with it, and I just decided, I wonder if I can do one myself. And reverse engineered it, and lo and behold, then I ended up making my very first. Again, it's nothing pretty, but it's my very first controller I made, and this one's for the Master System. And again, it was just getting a project box off Amazon and putting it together, and from there it just kind of grew. Like, once I got this one made and I enjoyed it, and I was just like, man, can I now maybe do this for the Atari? Because I was also really getting into the Atari 7800 at that point. And again, we can all talk about how wonderful those controllers are. So again, just did the same thing and made an Atari controller. And then it just kind of kept growing from there. It's just like, so when I decided to officially start BD RetroMods, I think I had about 7 controllers at that point. The original 7 was a 2600 handheld, an Atari dual stick, an NES controller, a Super NES, and Sega Genesis, and I think that might have been it because I said the dual stick already, right? Yeah. So yeah, those were like kind of my starting controllers with it, and pretty quickly into it, I kind of did some revisions to enclosures and stuff, and and again, just obviously been evolving those and then growing even more just based off of feedback. And because one of my goals when I was doing it, because again, I knew from my own need of these controllers that I'm sure I'm not the only one needing this. And I was looking for an area, I guess, of the market where's the sweet spot between a good quality controller and price. Because again, there's other options out there, depending on what you want, but for some, some people might not want a controller that's like a tank stick, big style in a metal enclosure. Oh, and you have others that might not want controllers that are just 3D printed because, 3D prints are what they are. They're 3D prints. And if you've ever held them, the quality doesn't feel the same as, an injection molded ABS enclosure. So again, I was trying to look at that middle spot, which is kind of why then I, went with the enclosures that I use now. And, and also with my parts, now I'm not using official Sanwa or HAP parts, but I'm still using good quality parts. Oh, Casey, you got something?
And
he does. Upon request, he will.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, especially people like me, you don't need the really super expensive. But that said, if somebody wants those parts, they can absolutely custom order them from you.
Oh, right? Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, because Casey did that for one of his, just because he was curious. He wanted to say, I wanted to see how much of a difference there really was. And I'm like, that's fine if you're wanting to pay that upcharge, because, again, those parts aren't cheap. And especially when you're not getting them in like a bulk type order. So, but again, the joysticks and buttons I use are all still really good. Hence, why people are buying as many as you see right now. I mean, if they weren't good, they wouldn't be buying them. And a lot of that came over trial and error because, when I decided to go with the parts that I am using, I mean, I ordered probably a dozen different joysticks, from different brands to find out what's the one that feels right at the best price point. Because again, I didn't want to get some cheap $1, $2 joystick in there that's not going to feel good, be extremely loose. So again, going through there, it's okay, this is a really good joystick. This is what I want for the for the price that I'm trying to stay in, and it's really good. And same with the buttons. And like I said, the brand that I use for a lot of that stuff, you would have likely saw in some other popular products like from Micro Center and stuff. So so again, they are good items. So
I gotta be careful what I put on the screen.
Oh, Poe.
So let me ask you a question, Brian. Now, obviously, buttons are rated like how many presses?
Yep.
And then the travel, right? Isn't there like a travel distance between the
so I mean, depending on your brands, I mean, you could have some quicker response per se. Most arcades buttons. Now again, when you're getting into the other ones for like hit boxes and stuff, you might get some different, quicker response times because of how they're designed. But overall, the overall response, I think, is very similar when it comes to just arcade buttons. But you do have your different styles where you have the Sanwa style, and then you have like the HAP style. And the buttons that I do go with, they are rated at 1 million clicks, so or presses, I should say. So 1 million presses, which is a pretty standard number there. So
okay. So you went. So once what was your first show?
So my first show was actually that Korg's where we met. That was my very first one, and
so I was actually one of your early customers because I got there early.
Yeah,
fairly early.
Yep.
That day. Wow, cool.
So yeah, no, that was my.
He got
first
there
one.
early and he stayed.
I never left.
But yeah, so I see there's a thing from Chris. One thing we'll show later in this show, I kind of started messing with Leaf joysticks, but the issue is just they're so big, like the enclosure, you got to go with those. I just don't know how practical it becomes. Like obviously, if you're putting into an arcade cabinet, it makes perfect sense, but the size of at least the Leaf joysticks that I ended up grabbing to try the idea that I had, I needed a real big enclosure that was almost about probably 4 inches high, which then that feels a little off when you're have it on a table and stuff. But yeah, no, I've looked into that, and I'll kind of show that here later in the show, kind of what I was looking at with that.
I'm so trying to be PG, and Phil keeps bringing them up.
I know, it's like a speed error. So keep going.
Oh,
just don't even bring it up, man. Just don't even bring it up. Just be professional.
Yeah. So
even if I'm not being, you be professional.
Yeah, wacky. I mean, all my controllers, like as long as they're the arcade style, like all of them can pretty much be done reversed. So like if you do prefer, right-handed, you can do that, or like the left-handed. So a flip phone style joystick? No, I don't have a flip phone style one.
Why don't we take a look at some? I know that Brian's put together a slideshow of kind of all the stuff he makes.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe not quite all of it, but
yeah, and I've come to realize I make a lot. And and until I really started putting this together today, I'm like, wow, I really make a lot of stuff now. I mean, then that's not a bad thing. It's just, as you keep making stuff, you just don't really think about how much other things you've really done. So, but yeah, if you want to pop that up, Phil, yeah, we'll kind of go through. So, kind of like what we talked about just a couple minutes ago is, like I said, the controllers, they can all be made to order. So if you want them, left-handed, right-handed joystick, we can do that. And with that also, I'm a true believer in giving options for your color choices. Because again, if you're going to have a custom controller, I mean, I feel like you should have the color you want. Now, obviously, try to do the best I can with that. There's some colors that just the manufacturer that I use for the buttons just don't make, and that's just how it is. But so again, like those are the color options I have right now when it comes to the Sanwa style and the HAP style buttons that I do. And then in addition to that, different ball tops, you can go with. Now, if you're wanting bat tops, that's one of those let me know prior, because I don't stock those as much. Because I have some, but I'll just be honest that they're not as popular as just having the ball top. So, again, just, those are the colors I usually try to have, but you'd have to just get with me first to make sure I truly have it before doing it. And then with these controllers, you can either order them online at my Etsy shop, or you can email me directly. And again, if you email me directly, I can usually do a little better on the price, because at the end of the day with Etsy, I have to factor their cut out of the cost. So, but then just to kind of go through all the different controllers that I do now, and we're trying to go in chronological order of consoles. I mean, I might get a couple of them messed up, but just to give you an idea, and at any time, if you guys want to jump in on any of these,
I actually do on this one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep. So obviously I have the handheld, because joystick, which again is just a good one to hold in the hand there. And then I also have a combo arcade style controller now because, and this was from requests because I had requests for people saying, hey, can you make a 2600 controller that uses a second button as duplicating up? So that way, when you're playing games that you would have to jump in an Atari game, you could just hit the second button instead of trying to hit up on the joystick while moving. And
which is terrible for any game, especially Atari games.
Yes. So I'm like, yeah, I can do that, but I didn't feel like it made sense to just make that only. So what I did is I actually combined it with my Sega Master System controller, which with that, so I have, you can't see it in the picture, but there's a little switch in the back where you can turn the controller into 2600 mode, or you can put it in Sega Master System mode. So, so again, that's a newer one that I just kind of released here a few weeks ago. So for folks,
there was a good question from CK. Do you ever use light up buttons, or do you have that? Is that even something you can do in a controller?
So I do, depending on it. So it depends on the console.
Look up.
So the one that Phil's holding up for the 7800, which again, like you can see, for some of these will work on multiple consoles. So obviously with the 7800, it'll also work on 2600, 2600 plus, Commodore 64, different things there. But yeah, so I do light up buttons if you really want them. There is a little bit of an upcharge, but I will be honest, I kind of moved away from it only because it's not that they're not cool, because it's really cool, but thanks to the 2600 plus, I found myself, moving away from it, because I don't know why, but the 2600 plus, when you're trying to use a 7800 controller that's lit up, it doesn't work right.
Yeah, this won't work right on the.
It doesn't work right, and it makes no sense because you can use a 2600 controller lit up, and it's perfectly fine on the console. But story of our lives with the 2600 plus. So because of that, with more people using the 2600 plus, I kind of moved away from the light up buttons, just because I just didn't want people to eventually maybe get a 2600 plus and then be like, why is my controller not work on it? So
can I interrupt you and ask you a question now? When you're at a show, if someone sees a control and they see you have and they're all blue buttons and they want a red button, do you make the changes there, or do you take an order and then mail it to them?
Yeah, so when it comes to the buttons, so like if I'm at a show, like I'll have extra ball tops and bat tops with me. Like if you want to change
those are easy changes.
Yeah, if you want to change those out, but I don't do button change outs at the show. Like if someone really wants something that custom, I just tell them, send me an email and I'll work with you there. Just because I don't want to be unscrewing the enclosure.
You don't have time.
Well, no. And as you know, with helping, I mean, you just don't have the time to do that. So, but yeah, at the shows, I can always easily swap out the ball top or bat top to whatever color you want. But the buttons, that is more with special order. So
Casey, when you come across a controller that you have, I need to be sure you jump in. Okay, bro.
Okay.
All right.
So then, and this one's really become popular here lately, the dual stick arcade style controller. So again, this is great for, and again, Phil has a lot of them. Phil's going to keep popping these up throughout the show. So, I mean, again, it works great with Robotron, Robot War from John Champeau, Stargate, and then the homebrew that Phil's holding up there, Defender Arcade.
This was
another
just
great one.
Part of the last chance sale. If you got Defender Arcade, what's nice about this is the two cables plug on each side of the 2600 plus. So one button is one side and one button is the other. So one is your bomb and one is your fire. It's perfect. It's right there. It's beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful.
And it's interesting because someone ordered one on Etsy just the other day and they messaged me about how great it is now playing Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I was happy to hear that, because I've never, again, most people get this for Robotron. I've told people that you could use this with Raiders of the Lost Ark and Stargate, Defender 2, things like that. But I never actually had someone contact me and say, hey, this is so great with Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it was just like, that is awesome. I mean, so, but like I said, this one's really picked up ever since the 2600 plus came out. This one, like I said, was a slower start, but like I said, in the last probably 6 months or so, 7 months, it's really, this one's really taken off. So
I just added it to my list. I'm gonna add
I was gonna say I gotta send you that. Yeah, I know you got a big list for me coming up.
And that's one that I will probably end up picking up as well. It's just such a good idea.
And then you know, these ones were just more kind of specialty ones I kind of came up with because you know, the track and field, you know, the original controller that Atari made for that, you know, is really hard to come by. And it's not cheap, and I kind of wanted to pay homage to it, and that's kind of why I was able to find a nice, you know, now it's transparent blue. It's not like the, you know, the blue color the original truly had. But
wait a minute, Casey, I'm blocking Casey's face.
Oh, jeez.
Sorry, Casey. What were you doing? You got two of these?
No.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so I did that one, and when I do these kind of homages to stuff, you know, I do try to add my own touch to it to make it more, you know, maybe ergonomical, things like that. So you know, like I said, that's with the track and field, and then I did the Space Invaders because that was actually last summer. I was at Galloping Ghosts and was playing the Space Invaders cabinet, and I kind of forgot all about how the controls were on Space Invaders in the arcade with the buttons. And I realized, man, I just spent an hour here playing Space Invaders, you know, because I really liked how this felt. And so when I got back from vacation, I'm like, I got to make one for it. So, and then on the sides of that Space Invaders, it also has up and down buttons. So that way, like if you are playing the 7800 version,
oh yeah, right there,
you can
there are the buttons
toggle
up and down,
the menu options and stuff.
Works really good. Yeah, especially on a 7800, you're going to need that.
Yep.
You guys get an idea why I've been sleeping on the couch? Okay.
And I was gonna say, I know Casey got this one, so yeah, this one was an interesting, you know, endeavor because you know, I started coming up with this as I started coming up with this idea probably about, oh man, it was probably around April-ish of last year. I'm like, man, I really want to do something with the paddles, and then it was just like literally as I'm developing this, then Atari announces the 2600 plus, and they have their own paddle pack, you know, and it's just like, oh, you know, like if they're re-releasing paddles, is someone really going to want my paddles, you know? But
the nice thing about this though, and it's, you know, Phil's showing a good example, left or right-handed options.
Yep.
As opposed to the paddles that had the button. And I mean, you could play it left or right, but the button feels better if you're holding it in your left hand.
Yep.
So
yeah. So yep. And with these, with all my paddles, they're actually using an aluminum knob. So it's not a, you know, a plastic knob. It's a these ones are 44 millimeter aluminum knobs that are on them. So then you got your
nice
arcade
knobs.
style button. Yeah. But again, I mean,
wait a minute, you guys be careful what you say in the chat. Okay.
but no, it's but no, I am happy though. Like this has been a very popular controller. People do really like these, and here at this last show, I did finally make a handheld because I just had requests for it. Because at the end of the day, you know, people just ask me like, hey, we like the idea of this, but can we still maybe get a handheld version? I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do that. So I did. And then like what Casey's holding up too is then the multiple paddle adapter, because this was one of my challenges when making.
I have that, but I didn't bring it up.
Oh, I was gonna say you should have it, but okay,
I do. Yeah. I didn't bring it up.
But the idea with that really came from because of the fact that I knew, like, you know, the paddle controllers, original ones are obviously conjoined together. They're two paddles going through the controller port. And it's just like, but man, is someone really going to want to buy two of mine, you know, at I struggled with that, and this was kind of the solution I came up with, because and Phil saw my one prototype at Pittsburgh. Like, I had a port in the back where I was looking at being able to daisy chain if someone bought a second one, but at the end of the day, this seemed to be the best option. And what was nice about this paddle adapter, then obviously you can put two of my paddles together for games, but also if you have the Hyperkin Ranger controller, you could technically plug that in and use that as well with that adapter.
Okay.
So that was kind of why I'm like, yeah, that's going to be the better route to go, because I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people probably have a Hyperkin Ranger or have tried it at some point, because it's a neat concept controller. I'm not saying it's the best, but it was neat, the idea they had.
It really isn't the best, but yes, it's neat.
Yeah. But then, so that was out of the Atari 2600 stuff, which, like we kind of mentioned, those 2600 items do work on the 8-bit Commodore 64 and 7800 for one-button games. But yep, and Casey has one that. So then, we got the Magnavox Odyssey 2, which this was kind of an interesting one, because quick history lesson, which it took me a while not a while, but I didn't know it initially. Was there was two versions of the console where, the very original consoles actually had controller ports, and
they took them away.
And then they're hardwired.
Yeah.
And they're not even nicely hardwired. They're like tucked between a crack in the case.
Yeah, it's bad. And but again, I only thought it only came hardwired. I never knew they had a version with ports, and so I started making, items for that, knowing that, for the ones for the controller port. So again, handheld style and an arcade style. And then I also do an NES Dogbone style with it, for those who would rather have an actual controller instead of a joystick. But then two new items I made this year that I had at Korg's was cable adapters. So I actually have two versions. I have one for the controller port version, and I have one for the hardwired. If you're comfortable opening your console up, that ultimately these adapters will allow you to play your Atari controller on your Odyssey 2. So, and again, it's in both ways to do that. So,
I like that idea.
What's up?
I really like that idea.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah, thanks. No, and honestly, that was one of my pushes this year. Was I wanted to make adapters, and it was only because I get it. Not everyone can buy every single controller. I mean, for those that do, awesome. But you might just have a favorite Atari controller or a favorite Master System controller or something that you might want to be able to use on multiple consoles. So, this was kind of a more affordable way to be able to do that. So.
Now, I noticed there was no 2600 Dogbone controller. I know that shape is very popular with a lot of people.
So actually, I do have it. It's in my 7800 section.
I figured it might be. It might be.
Yep. Yeah, and that's where, like, when we were doing in chronological, like if I was doing alphabetical, it would have all been.
I thought that you were. So I actually I jumped the gun, didn't I?
No, you're fine. We don't script.
Spoiler alert.
We don't script this. It's all good. So, but then the TI-99 is, another one that, and again, if you watched the podcast I was on with Tech Buzz Gaming, again, a funny story with this one. It was actually the Korgs where I met Phil. I had at least 5 or 6 people ask me for the TI-99. Like, do I make something for the TI-99? And when I got to about person number 4 or so, I had to ask, and I looked like such a fool. And I'm just like, I have to ask this. Like, why do you need a controller for your calculator? And I mean, it was just one of those. I never knew they made a microcomputer. I never knew that. And
it's really hard to get controllers for it.
Right. And
I wanted one of those really bad back in the
day. Yeah, I mean, it was
I got one.
Because I was thinking of my old TI calculators I had in high school and college, and I'm just like, and those were a lower, because I think it was a TI 82 and 83 I was messing with. So when people were talking about TI 99, I'm like, oh, this must have been something that's come out a few years ago, some high-end calculator or something. But yeah, so again, that was one of my oops.
I was laughing whenever you told that story I watched that show.
Yeah. So ultimately,
Brian's just thinking, it's like, I'm going to spell some really cool upside down words with this joystick on my TI-99.
Right. Well, and the thing was, is like, I remember with some friends, like programming some little games, like text-based, turn-based games on the TI calculator. So I'm like, so I don't know, but nonetheless, I did finally realize what the TI-99 truly was. And after Korgs, I immediately went on eBay and I bought myself one. And then from there, I started making stuff for it. So
and that is half the brilliance of this business idea, because you got to be like, honey, people are asking for this controller, but I need the system to be able to figure out what's going on.
Testing.
That's right. Now, I've gotten a lot of new consoles over the years now. But then I did make a dog bone style for the TI-99, and then the new thing I made this for at Korgs was an Atari cable adapter for that. So again, the other TI controllers, obviously, you could only do one player with them because again, the original TI controllers were conjoined together, so I made an adapter that allows you to use your Atari controllers with the TI-99. Or technically Sega Master System as well, if you wanted to. So, and then lastly on that end is just, I did make because again, I got my TI-99 and I had no way to hook it up to my television. So then I ultimately made a 12-foot composite cable that I made.
Okay, nice.
For that. And again, I went 12-foot because there's other ones out there you could buy that are like 6, 3 to 6 feet, But again, thinking if you want to get to the keyboard of it, and if you are maybe sitting in your living room, you can pull it a lot closer to you to be able to do that. So,
yeah.
And again, that particular cable works on a variety of different Atari 8-bit systems as well. So,
Phil, don't put those numbers up on the screen. Just saying.
I know. I can imagine.
It's grade 5 all over again.
Right. But then these ones.
This is really cool. You got to get in contact with the My Drug Sibling channel because they play a lot of Coco games, and AJ is constantly complaining about how crap that joystick is.
And it is, because I got one because again, I always make it a point, like I don't make a controller for a system that I do not have. So obviously I had to go search for, after I started getting a bunch of requests for this, I'm like, well, I need to go find myself a Coco, and so I was able to get a hold of a Coco 3, and which are, and again, the games are backward compatible with it and stuff. But so with that, I came up with, arcade style controller. Now it is a digital controller. So, the Tandy was originally analog. So there could be some games that don't work right with it. But in many cases, I think a majority of them do work perfectly fine with the digital.
Kind of like the 5200. You can play almost the entire library with a regular joystick.
Yep. So, and then with that, I got the idea of the paddle controller then, because there's a number of games they made, like Clowns and Balloons, Popcorn, Space Assault, where that paddle type control movement just, I think, felt a lot better for those games. And given the fact that they were spin-offs of Atari games that used paddles, it was just like, I think it makes sense to try to make a paddle controller for the Tandy, and that's what I did. So. But then I also made an adapter. So if you want to use your Atari controller on it, you can do that. Now, when it comes to like the Coco 3, it would need to be a Sega Master System controller for 2 buttons. Okay. So because the Coco 3 and Tandy 1000, the controller used 2 buttons, where the other Coco 1, Coco 2 was just a 1-button controller. So
now, this adapter, though, would not work with paddles, correct?
Correct. It would not work with paddles. Yep. And then again, another request that I made for Korgs this year was the MSX. So again, it works with MSX, MSX2, 2 Plus. and again, an arcade style controller. And then I made an adapter. So if you want to use your Sega Master System on your MSX, you could just do that instead. So.
There we go.
And then also did some NES style controllers with the MSX.
I like the fact that you've got both here because, like I said, I know like everybody's like, oh, the dog bone controllers are the best. No, for me, it's the OG NES controller. Feels so much better in the hand just for me. Maybe it's just muscle memory or something, but I don't like the angled buttons.
Well, I think with a lot of it, it's personal preference at the end of the day. I mean, they're both good. I mean, I play with both all the time.
I can use either one, but I do like the dog bone.
I prefer the dog bone only because of the squareness of the old one. It kind of, to me, it digs into my hand a little bit, but that's just me.
Then you're holding it wrong.
Oh,
how many ways can you hold a controller, dude?
I was going to say, Casey's bought 3 of these.
Everybody complaining about, oh, the corners are are you holding it like this as if there's buttons on top? You hold it like this. Doesn't hurt you at all.
No, look.
Yeah, why are you doing that?
Because that's the way I hold it.
You don't need to. You hold it like this.
It's not a matter of need. That's my personal preference.
Well, not that there's anything wrong with that.
But yeah, so then I did make one for the Intellivision too, and Casey, you want to give your thoughts on this one?
I like them. I did that other version on the right, and I have a 4-way and 8-way, and then I also have the Sanwa version. I can't remember. Is that one 8-way? I can't even remember.
Mine's
no. You had that one go. You had that one go 4-way.
Okay.
Yep. So,
do you have a 3-way joystick?
Be careful.
I do that.
Be careful. I knew it was coming. As soon as I said, before I could even say be careful, it came out of his mouth.
But yeah, so I mean, so again, I do make this available now. There is limitations to this, but like Casey said, as long as you understand those limitations, it is a good controller for the games that it does work with. So, and
the overlays don't go in, but a lot of games I don't use them anyway, and you can just lay it down next to you if you need it.
Yeah, the thing that for anybody that may not know, because I know sometimes we have people in the chat who aren't familiar, the Intellivision had a 16-way joystick, which makes it very hard to create something that works for everything. To my recollection, I know there's some stuff that's being worked on that maybe could do it, but there is no single controller option that is going to perfectly do everything aside from an original controller. And I know a lot of people don't like that disc. So like Brian said, as long as you know, like if you want, you can play most games with a 8-way joystick. Some of them won't feel quite right. I do know that you can play the majority of homebrews perfectly. Yes, that's a photoshopped Genesis controller, but it would be a good idea. But most homebrews will play just fine with an 8-way joystick. And for games like Pac-Man, a 4-way joystick obviously is the preference. But it all depends on specifically what you want to do as to whether or not you would be getting one of these. That's my opinion.
I don't use it for baseball, but I did try games like Burger Time. I tried my 8-way. I tried my 4-way. I had no issues with either one.
Yep.
And then also made an adapter for it, which I think Casey got some of those as well, that to be able to plug into your original Intellivision. So if you have because again, they hardwired in the original Intellivision. So this adapter allows you to hook an Intellivision 2 controller to your Intellivision or INTV3 consoles. So
yep.
That was the other thing.
Good question here.
Oh, you have one dog bone in stock. Yeah, so actually if you're wanting more, I can like that one I can easily update. It's just I literally had a sale here on one just yesterday, or not yesterday, but the day before. So I haven't updated the quantity, but usually those particular ones I can usually get those out pretty quickly. Because when I do those, I try to do those ones more in batches, because again, there's not really any customizing you can do. It's literally the NES controller, so it's what's there is what you're going to get. So I usually try to do those more in batches. So yeah, I can usually get those ones out pretty quickly. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you finish your thing.
Oh yeah, but again, depending on what controllers you're looking at, though, some of them could take longer than others. So I mean, I usually tell people, like, if they're doing an Intellivision or a ColecoVision or an Atari Jaguar arcade stick, that I usually say give me about 2 weeks. If I'm really busy, I might even say 3 weeks, and it's just because those ones take a lot longer to put together than some of my other ones. But usually, I try to get them out within a week. So.
And both, whether you're watching on the Retro Bliss Gaming channel or Mix Gaming Gala, in the description, there's a link to Brian's social media. If you want something and you'd like to purchase it directly from him, Etsy takes like 10%. So if you're comfortable dealing with Brian, which I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't be, but Etsy, you have your purchase protection or whatever. But if you're comfortable dealing directly with Brian, send him an email. It's more of the money where the guy who's doing it.
Yep.
I'd phrase that badly, but more of the money goes to Brian.
Well, this would be a good time to stop, because what I want to do is I want to tell a story.
Okay.
Mike.
Yep. Okay. Well, you want to take this off and put us?
Yeah. Brian was telling a story one time. He was telling a story to me, and he wasn't telling to me to be braggadocious in any way. And
so I don't mean to interrupt, but I think I know what you're talking about, and I'm going to show that here in my prototype section. Are you talking about that one controller that was modified?
Yeah.
Save it for there.
Okay. Well, okay, but let me. I won't say what it is, but there's going to be this controller that he shows. And the reason why I'm going to bring it up is I want you to pay attention to this one, because he made this controller, and the reason he made this controller will tell you what kind of guy he is. Okay, and why I believe you can trust him. Okay, as you were. Let's go.
Oh, yep. So then we got the ColecoVision, which I know everyone in here has one. Either my original model that I did or the new updated one. Because the original model I used a kit for, and my new model now that Mike has, I do that one all in-house now. So, but again, I offer two styles. I think the one the everyone's holding up, the super action style, is definitely gives you the most functionality, because again, you get the full keypad, you get the 4 action buttons with that. But I do make another version for those that might only want to just for like the more basic games, where it's just the 2 buttons of the ColecoVision, and then the buttons up top is literally your asterisk button and your number 1 key button. So that way you can at least start the games, because like all the games you need one or the other to start. So again, if you don't need the keypad, and because again, not every game used the keypad. So again, it's just personal preference, and I did both just to have a more economical version for someone that might not need the full capabilities of the super action. But then this is the big one, the Vectrex. So last year at this time, I introduced the digital arcade style controller, which has been very popular. But then I've still had people asking, like, it's awesome you make this digital one, but again, Vectrex was analog, and but with that said, there's only about 3 games that I'm aware of that will not work with a digital controller. And 2 of them, I believe, are homebrews. So with that, I finally, this is one I put on and off the shelf constantly. Like, because again, I already had the digital. This was looked at a lot when I was there. Yeah.
I'm serious.
That analog Vectrex controller, I know we're PG, but that is so sexy. It looks so good. And I'm actually curious before you get into it, because that is a different style, and I know you sold out of them at Core, so you don't have any to actually show us.
Yep.
But it is a lower profile enclosure.
It is. So I can show you on the hitbox a little bit here, so you can kind of see. Yeah. So it is definitely a
zero doubt that enclosure probably costs a little bit more.
It does.
But is that available? Like, if you wanted a ColecoVision with that low profile controller enclosure, would that even work?
It would not, because it doesn't.
Oh,
yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah,
I've trust me. If I could put all my stuff in that, I would. But it just, unfortunately,
it's a beautiful enclosure.
Yeah, it's just the depth you need for your joystick is what gets you. So, and then
I'm happy and sad at the same time, because now I don't have to buy more Intellivision controllers. I was like,
that's how I feel. It's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Quit making controllers.
Right. So yeah, no. So like I said, I did do the analog style, and like I said, that was on and off for a long time, and I finally was able to. Well, because I wasn't happy where I was going with it, and then when I came across this enclosure and this color of the enclosure, because initially I could only get it in the color that I showed of the NES hitbox. I'm like, oh yeah, now we're cooking with gas, and now I want to get this done. So, and again, it is, I'm really happy at how that one turned out. So, but then this one, just a quick one. This was a request I had from my friend Jay Squarepegs. He ended up getting the Famicom copy of Hyper Olympics or one or the other. It was either Olympic or Sports, I can't remember, but he didn't have the controllers for it. So he asked, like, hey, are you able to make like a replica of the Hypershot controller that was for the Famicom? And this is what I came up with. So again, 1 or 2 player editions are available, because again, just because of how that controller was designed. But again, check his channel out, if you're interested to see that in action. But then good old faithful, the Nintendo Entertainment System. So obviously I do an arcade style controller for that. But then I also decided to do a track and field controller, because again, making that Famicom one, it's because it's real fun to play with that. It's just like, why did they never make a controller like that here in the States for track and field? You had it in Japan, but they didn't have it here. So, looking at how the controller was set up to play track and field, I was able to remap to then put it in this style to actually be able to play it like a Hypershot controller. So, again, this only works with track and field. It will not work with track and field 2. It's literally only track and field, just like how it was in Japan with Hyper Olympic and Sport, which is what they were called in Japan.
There was a question.
Oh, yeah.
So someone wants to know if you have a warranty on your custom controllers.
I mean, I don't know that I would say I have an quote unquote an official warranty, but I mean, if it's not like that long of a period from the time you bought it, I mean, obviously I'll work with you if there's a problem. I mean,
so what if they say, hey, it's not working, and they mail it back to you and it looks like the case has been cracked because they threw it on the ground or whatever? What are you going to do?
Yeah. I would hope at that. I hope there'd be some honesty there, going with that. But I mean, obviously I stand by my stuff. So if there's a problem, I'll work with you on it. I mean, but I wouldn't say I put an official warranty. But like I said, if there is something that is,
you'll be willing to look at it. Right?
I'll be willing to look at it and make sure it's right. So
okay, all right.
But then this was a new one I did, which again I kind of just showed. It was the NES hitbox style, and again this kind of came from a friend of mine that is a big fan of Tetris and Dr. Mario and stuff, and I was like, I think a hitbox style would actually play good for those type of games, and that's kind of where I came up with the idea to do that. So, and again, it's a unique experience. It's just, it all comes down to what you want to, what you're into there. So, but But again, it does take muscle memory to get used to a hitbox style. Because again, when you're so entrenched to how to play with a joystick or a D-pad, it is, you are fighting 30 years of muscle memory, for 40 years. So, but yeah. So then I've got Sega Master System, which again, I have the basic arcade style controller, but then this is just a repeat, my combo controller. Because at the end of the day, I'm kind of phasing this one out. Now, if someone really wants it to just be a Sega Master System, by all means, I'll still make it. But at least when I go to shows and stuff, it's going to be the combo controller that's going to be there moving forward. So, but then I also do NES styles for those. And again, so much better than the original Master System D-pad. So, and then I did a hitbox style for the Master System as well. So, and now we get into the Atari 7800 because we're doing this in chronological order.
Well, it looked the same.
Yeah. But, so the Atari 7800, the handheld joystick was something I made shortly after the release of the 2600 Plus because for the longest time it was just the arcade style controller. But I saw so many posts online about people so upset that there wasn't a 7800 handheld controller.
This is cherry, man. if you want a handheld,
yeah.
If you want a handheld for your 7800. Even if you're playing 2600 games on your 7800, this is awesome.
Yeah,
man.
And again, it works nice because they are smaller buttons to fit on the handheld. Obviously, they're a 16 millimeter push button. But again, what's nice is the way I have those set up. They're it's ergonomically designed. Where you can just roll your thumb over the two buttons. So.
Now, are you sure you didn't want to put the joystick way off center at the top so that it falls out of your hand?
Oh, I mean, I guess if you really want to get that true 7800 feel and some other Coleco as well, we could have done that. But yeah, that would have been bad. I don't think we would have want the buttons on the side and the joystick up at the top. So, but then, of course, like I said, we got the arcade style controller for it and then the NES style controllers. And then a hitbox style. And
of course, a hitbox.
Of course. Well, and again, it's just because I like to have fun and experiment for some stuff. So obviously, I want to make controllers that are fully functional with stuff. But I like coming up with some newer ideas of controllers that didn't exist that could be functional in some ways for somebody. So, oh geez, I just saw Poe's comment. I can't answer that one, Poe.
I'm not even putting it up there. I saw it out the corner of my one good eye.
It's a hitbox controller with a plate.
Yeah, there you go. And then this was one that came at the request of Phil, and this one I don't want to say it was a struggle, but it definitely had a couple WTF moments with it.
You had to go back to the drawing board a time.
Yeah, because all thanks to the 2600 Plus. So again, this is an Asteroids style that's kind of paying homage to the old Starplex controller. Whenever I built it and tested it, I played it on the 2600 and 7800. Never thought to really, I better check a 2600 Plus. And so I actually had to put a switch on the back to put it in 7800 mode and 2600 mode, simply because of the 2600 Plus. Which
is so silly.
It's so silly because when you play Asteroids on a true 7800, if you have a 2600 controller plugged into it, it automatically changes the control scheme to match the 2600. It does not do that when you play 7800 Asteroids on the 2600 Plus. And it will only work with a 7800 controller. So that's where we kind of had to go back and forth on a little bit. And then I did have to redesign the board inside to ultimately do the switching. And I mean, it's cool now that it's done, but it's like really, and again, moving forward, I need the stuff to work on the 2600 Plus because, folks are buying it. And I don't want to have that oopsie of, oh, I didn't, think about that, so I, obviously moving forward, I got to make sure everything works on the 2600 Plus as well. So,
Now, do you have this one available in the other enclosure? Since it's all buttons?
We probably could. I couldn't use the same style. So like I couldn't use the HAP style. We'd probably have to go with the smaller, like the buttons I have in there now for the hitbox.
I would actually suggest that as an option.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the fact that the way you have to lay your hands, if you can, and you're not opposed to having the rounded buttons, try it. Mm-hmm. I honestly, if I had to do it over again, I might get that style instead of what I have. I'm perfectly happy with what I have. Trust me, I am. I actually have done a review on this, and I'm very happy with it. But if you're looking to get this, I would definitely consider getting the thinner case.
Yeah, so it's definitely
and it would give Phil another version to buy.
I don't know. I don't know if I can.
For 2-player with your granddaughter.
There you go.
Mike, always the salesman.
But then we have the Sega Genesis 6-button arcade style controller. We have the TurboGrafx.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, with turbo switches.
Which has the switches on it for turbo. Now, again, it's one mode of turbo, so it's just the map. Because, if you remember the original controllers, you had no turbo, the lower turbo mode, and the higher turbo mode. So this is just off or high turbo. So
now this is on my list, right?
If not, I'll make sure it is.
I think it is.
There is something awesome about toggle switches on a controller, number one. Number two, have you thought about using the 3-way toggle switches? Because then you could get both levels of turbo.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't. I have to look. Because, I'll have to look to see if I could make that work with all three or not. Because, like I said, I definitely wanted to make sure we had the high turbo. Because I don't know how often the lower turbo was ever really used. But yeah, right now it is just off and high turbo, and then it does come with an adapter so that it works with the PC Engine as well. So, and then we have Super Nintendo, arcade stick, Neo Geo. Like if you are into the AES or if you have a consoleized MVS, I do have a Neo Geo option available. Oh yeah, yep.
We were talking when you had got up earlier, and I was like halfway through the show, just to throw them, I should pull this out and say, this is my favorite BD RetroMods controller.
Oh, yeah, right.
Hey, before you go to the Jaguar, someone has asked, actually, I think a very good question about your Intellivision controller. And they noticed that you don't realistically use overlays with the ones that you have, the models that you have now. Mm-hmm. Are you considering a future option where you could maybe insert overlays into a future?
Yeah, I mean, probably not. And it's just
you'd have to use different buttons.
Yeah.
What about the buttons on the other ColecoVision controller like I have with the little rail just to slide them over?
Yeah, I mean, possibly. It's just the problem is just the way you got to wire up each key of the keypad with it. I don't know that you can get just a straight. There would have to be some other things logistically within pairing it, because you can't just use just a standard keypad. You'd have to have something different there with it. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I would never consider it, but I mean, I think as of right now, I probably it's not on like a high top priority at the moment. And it's just because I really like the feel of those buttons when it comes to pressing down on them. And I think Casey even mentioned it. I don't know how often you really use the overlays.
Well, Mike and Casey know this. I'm fairly new to the Intellivision, but most of you guys that have played some of these older games actually know which buttons do what from muscle memory and from just knowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and ones that you don't, like I have noticed for some, like if I'm playing on my keyboard or with a 360 controller and a keyboard through an emulator, I'll just put the overlay in front of me. I'll look down at the overlay. Oh, that's a button I have to hit.
Yeah,
I set it right next to the controller, especially on homebrews. I do not use those.
Yeah, because you got to keep them mint. We're stupid like that.
But yeah, so then now we got the Jaguar here. That like I said, I do arcade style controller, and
that's a thing of beauty, man.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of pride in that one. Again, full disclosure, that is not a cheap one because there's just a lot involved with it, and just with parts and just the time it takes to get it all put together. But you don't see it in.
That's a good idea. Add the rotary to that.
So actually, and you can't see it in the picture, but on the left side of it, the rotary mod is on the left side of the arcade stick. So you can actually on the side. Like I said,
on the side of the thing?
Yeah, on the side of the joystick. Yeah,
is that the little thing showing at the side bottom?
Yes. So so that arcade, so that rotary knob, the same style that's on the controller next to it, is actually on the side of the joystick there in the front.
So you have to reach under the joystick to play with the knob.
Yes. but then also on the side there's additional buttons for the remaining keypads, because for those that aren't familiar with the 6-button Jaguar controller, the extra buttons were just remappings of the keypad. So like those top 3 red buttons would be 6, 7, 8, and then the 2 black ones is 4 and 6. And then I have the other numbers on the side. So, yeah, I'm pretty proud of this one. I do really like how that's turned out, because there was a lot of time that went into making this one happen. So,
yeah, that looks good.
And yeah, because I did that design, which then I have get custom printed on the arcade controller and stuff. And yeah, it's really cool. Yeah. 4, 5, 6. Yeah. I said I don't remember off the top of my head. You're probably right, but yeah. So yeah. Actually, I think it might have been 7, 8. Yeah, 7, 8, 9, 4, 6 is what I believe those are. So, but yeah. But then, like I said, I have the standard rotary mod done to original first party controller. And again, you don't see it in the picture, but there is a switch on the back to allow you to toggle between the D-pad and the rotary. Because again, you might see other things like this where people sacrifice the D-pad out of it and put the rotary mod there.
Yeah.
It's just, these are becoming harder and harder to come by. I don't feel right sacrificing a controller at this point to do that.
Says the guy that drilled a hole to put a rotary in there, but I mean,
it's still a functional controller, and it just made it.
It is. Better. It is. You haven't eliminated its original functionality. I give you that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, went too far. But then I do a Sega Saturn arcade stick, a Sony PlayStation combo. So it has a USB plug and a PlayStation 1-2 plug to it, so you can play this on the 1, 2, or 3. And then I do also have a Nintendo Switch arcade stick that also works with MAME and RetroPie. So, and then this does have turbo functionality, which those buttons are on the right side of it, and a home button on there. But then I also have USB controllers that work with MAME, RetroPie, and Mister, which is arcade spinner controller and arcade trackball controller. So, and again, both of these are great, and both have been very popular items. So
I have the spinner controller. I don't think I bought the trackball yet, but I definitely need to.
Yeah, and the trackball, I mean, again, because you can configure stuff within MAME or whatever you're using, but the buttons at the top, one of them is to cycle the colors. So the white around the trackball actually lights up, and you have about a dozen. Ooh. You have a dozen different color options, and then the other button is to change the speed of the trackball. So within the trackball itself, you can change up to 6 different speeds. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So. but yeah, so then the only thing I did forget, which I can pull it up here later and show as we're going through the slides, because again, I got so much stuff now, I completely forgot. I do make a 5200 controller. I did not have a slide on that. So I do make a digital 5200 controller as well. So
is there thought to make an analog one?
I've thought about it, but I don't have.
I mean, it's a very specific kind of feel.
Yeah.
For that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a possibility. I know there's someone who's modifying analog, because most analog controllers now come with 10K pots in them, 5K or 10K, and then the 5200, for whatever reason in their infinite wisdom, used 500K pots, which is just like crazy for what it is. But so I know there's someone, because I've seen it on Atari Age, that's like modified those 10K pot analog joysticks to actually, pull those out, put 500K pots in there. But obviously they got to do some extra like 3D printing and stuff to make it fit right within those to be able to do it. So, I believe it's a 2 1/4, Chris, the trackball. So, but yeah, so those were, all the different options I have now. So one of the things I thought would be cool, was to kind of show some like different things that aren't really available, just some little fun things I've done or things I thought about making and just never really finished it through.
Things I can look forward to sleeping on the couch for later.
Yeah, so someone asked before about like using leaf joysticks, and so one thing I was working on, but like I said, the enclosure I ended up having to get was just it was huge. I mean, it was about 11 inches wide and like 4 inches high, and because again, getting original Leaf arcade joysticks they're huge, and so this was kind of a dual stick style I was thinking about messing with actual Leaf controllers, because I know if you do Robotron in the arcade, they actually used Leaf controllers for that. So I was trying to mess around with that, and at some point I'll probably finish it, but it was just one of those things where just other things came up, and at the end of the day, this isn't something that's not something I can necessarily see selling, because it's going to be expensive, because again, Leaf joysticks aren't cheap, and that's another reason why I kind of just like it might be a fun thing to have at shows and stuff, but I don't know that I would put this into actual quote unquote production as I started building it. But then the next one, I did have this at a couple shows just to kind of show off. So it was just the track and field controller using bigger giant buttons. So these are like, yeah, right, exactly. It was hilarious, just especially watching kids play it. Once they understood what they had to do, just seeing them just go to town on that controller. Because again, those buttons are designed to take a big beating there, and they light up as well. And again, it was just a fun little thing, not something I'm quote unquote selling, but it was just a fun thing to make and have people enjoy. So this was the thing that Phil was talking about. So ultimately, some folks reached out to me on Facebook saying, "Hey, could you help this one individual out?" So there was someone who, lost their fingers on their right hand, and therefore really couldn't use a regular Nintendo controller, and then just some people who saw them talking like reached out to me like, "Hey, is there something you can do for this person? Like, can you make something that would work, to be able to just use their left hand?" And with that, that's where I kind of came up this, worked with them, and and again, this isn't something I'm selling. This is something I literally just did as a one-of for this person, and again, it worked out great. Again, it pretty much moved the buttons to the back of the controller so that you could just literally hold it with your left hand. So you can use your thumb to move the directional pad around, and then you had your two fingers in the back to be able to touch the B and A, and they were purposely off. They weren't lined up because again, when you hold your fingers back there, you had that, had wanted it.
One's longer than the other.
Yep. Right. So, so again, that was the thing that I did. And, again, it was just a one of that was just, again, to help someone out there.
That's what impressed me. I heard that story the very first day I met you, and I was like, what? And that's what turned me on to you, man. I'm like, this dude's got something going on. And that's one thing I thought, if he would do that for somebody, then he's a good guy, man. He's just a good guy.
Yep, thank you.
So.
But then this one was a challenge. So this is where I had fun with this. So like there was literally someone who they loved the NES Advantage, but they really wanted it to play on their Master System. And they're like, is there any way you can make this happen? So it's like, obviously I'm going to take the challenge. I'm going to see what I can do. So, and now full disclosure before people freak out, this was already a non-working NES Advantage. So I didn't just completely total an NES Advantage, because I know there's folks out there that swear by these things. But ultimately,
buttons always get stuck. The A and B buttons always seem to get stuck. I don't like that.
Yeah. So with that, literally modified it to work on the Sega Master System, and I got
it's hilarious seeing a Sega logo on that.
Right. So again, I mean, it
didn't change the colors or anything. It's just like, nope, this is Sega now.
That's right. And the turbo works with on the Master System too. So I mean, it still it kept its turbo functionality. And now the only buttons that don't work is obviously the select and the slow button and the toggle to player 2, because it doesn't have a second, off of it. But again, it was just a neat kind of challenge for someone, and it ended up working out. So this was a interesting project here. Again, it never fully came to fruition, but you never know. So if someone decides they have a game where this might be beneficial, it could maybe see the light of day again. But the idea behind this was to kind of make a quote unquote rhythm controller for the ColecoVision. So those buttons like literally will be your up, down, left, right, and the 2 action buttons. And with that, this is a handheld controller. The width of it's the same size as an NES controller. It's just slightly thicker in depth. And again, neat concept. Just, obviously there's not really any functionality yet, because there's no game out there that utilizes it. But it's a neat concept if something does maybe come to light with that. Because what did get looked at, and again, it's kind of still in limbo right now. So instead of a handheld, it was more of an arcade style, again, the tap. Where again, I was kind of working with 8-bit Millie, which is now Console Moo, on this. So again, instead of doing the handheld, which was kind of prototype 1, kind of landed on this, and this one would work with ColecoVision and Atari. Again, at some point you might see a rhythm-based game with that, and if so, obviously this controller would become more available. But right now, it's just kind of a one-of thing until something gets made that could utilize it. This is another idea. It's still in, looking through here, is kind of what I'm deeming the ColecoVision Maze controller. So the idea behind it is it's kind of based off of Mousetrap, where you got the red, yellow, blue door. So instead of having to hit the keypad, now you got actual buttons for it, and then the green buttons for the dog. And then on the side, have additional buttons to help you select your difficulty levels. Now, one thing I'm looking to do yet, I'm probably going to add a 5th button between the yellow and the blue. That's just going to be your basic action button. So then that way you can do like Burger Time and maybe some other games that make sense, because this is using a 4-way gate in it as well, because of it being a maze controller. So again, it's just something I'm playing with. Not sure where it's going to go yet, but I think it's a neat concept, because I personally don't like trying to use the keypad on a regular ColecoVision, and even my own ColecoVision controller I make. Just to try to remember to hit those keypads when trying to play Mousetrap, can be a pain sometimes. So then this was another thing I started to work on. I never actually made them official. So, I kind of wanted to spice up my NES controllers that I did some with some special overlays, maybe some special casing colors.
I like those.
I mean,
I used to do these.
Did you? That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that at the end of the day, what held me back on these was just like the print quality was great. It was just the material, though, still not that same material you had on an NES controller. So, I mean, you had to really be careful applying those and making sure you didn't see any, dust particles, things like that. And so at the end of the day, it was just like, right now, it's not at a good spot. Now, I do have a friend who just recently purchased like a huge industrial grade printer to do like shirts and stickers and other things that he believes that he can mimic the material of the NES overlay, which if so, then we're going to probably have a whole new conversation here with these. But again, these are just some designs I kind of came up with. And right now they're just literally my own use. And like, as you can kind of see here, I got it, for it. So, but then these here, because these ideas were, because when I was coming up with the handheld versions, it's like, ultimately I went with what I did, but, I've done some different iterations of enclosures, and it seems to be a catch-22 where people ask, hey, I want a bigger enclosure. So then I make a bigger enclosure. Hey, can you make a smaller enclosure? So people have all different sizes that they prefer with it. So when I was looking at my handheld, I was initially thinking, instead of like the handheld that I did ultimately release, can I do something that's like an in-between? And these were the kind of what I came up with. And again, it's nice. I mean, it works. It's just the issue I ran into was, for whatever reason, the cost of that enclosure more than doubled after my first couple test enclosures I purchased. And it's just like, well, that's a problem, number one. But then the other thing is that the feet that come with it, because as you guys know with your controllers, the feet that I put on them really keep it from moving. That wasn't the case with these. And I just like, yeah, that's a problem, as well. So, but again, if at some point I want to look at, can I make quote unquote slim versions? Because I do get requests, because like you saw the one.
I do like the look of that. I really like the look of it.
Right. And I did the same thing with like the two button. So like when I released the Atari 7800 in the version I did, this was what I initially kind of looked at, again, to try to find, is there a happy medium where it can be both handheld or put on a table? But again, it was the same factors with this as well. And again, I do like what I ultimately landed on with the layout of the handheld.
See, I have a concern as a consumer. The smaller that you get, the more I think that the button should be on. As a right-handed person, the button should be on the left side, because especially on an Atari controller, because I'm used to the buttons being on the left side.
Well, with all of these,
if I'm holding it in my hand, I want it on the left side.
Right.
That's just me. If it's something that's going to be on a table, fine, because I've gotten used to playing it on the table with my left hand as far as a stick's concerned. But if I'm holding, let me see if I can find it real quick. If I'm holding the, no, I can't find it. But if I'm holding your new 7800 handheld, you can do it either way. But I'm always using the buttons on the left side, because I always played my 2600 games using the buttons on the left side. So if it's going to be small enough that I can play with in my hand, that's where I want the buttons.
And you just ask them to have them on the left.
Yeah,
What?
I mean, again,
he does that.
Yeah, I mean, I could always reverse them if people want it. Now,
Okay.
but again, why I landed on what I did though is to your point though, like those handhelds that I already make, you can go either way, left or right. So you
Yeah,
don't have
those
to
you
have
can already. They're built that
right.
way.
So because of that, I mean, again, I liked how these looked, but again, it's just I was really shocked when the price of the enclosures more than doubled. Plus, just the feet on them just aren't the best quality, so they slide a lot. So, and that's kind of why these.
What I would, mixed. If like obviously this one with the double price enclosures, you probably won't. But what you do for something like that size, instead of having feet, just have like a solid non-stick or a non-sliding material on the whole bottom of it.
Yeah, that
should get rid of that problem.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Okay.
And then I also tried it with the so like when I was looking at the paddle handheld. So
that looks so sweet. Good.
I love that.
Yeah, but again, it's the same dilemma that I ran into, and it's just like at the end of the day, because again, people like my whole idea of the paddle, but they wanted something smaller, and that's what I mean. Some people want smaller controllers, other people want bigger controllers. So, but again, same issues with this. At the end of the day, is what kind of caused me not to go this route. As much as I like it, I mean, and like you said, it's pretty. I mean, I got my one of copy of it, that. But again, it's just these feet just do not hold well, and like I said, the price of the enclosure just didn't make it feasible, because I have a hard time saying, hey, I make this now, but it's going to cost you, I mean, I'm just making this number up, it's going to cost you $20-$25 more than the other one, so
there's something about me, because that looks so good, I want to just make Bliss jealous and buy the one of, so that he can never have it.
That's good.
The silver lining to every cloud is I won't be sleeping on the couch or shed, but yeah, I will still be jealous.
But then the other, because I think this is the next slide now, I hope, but there was one controller that just like I really wanted it to be successful. I really did. But then, I just figured no one's going to buy this. No one's going to buy it.
Yes! I was like, Bubsy, I will admit, I was hoping for like orange faux fur over the whole thing. We'll take this. We'll take this.
But, at the end of the day.
How much is that?
I honestly, I made it specifically for this episode, so I don't quote unquote have a price for it. But
oh man!
But yeah, no, I just yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a funny little thing where it is a Sega Genesis 6-button arcade stick, Bubsy themed, and but yeah, I mean, the reality is, if I would try to make a bunch of these, probably no one's going to buy them.
Because it needs to be a Jaguar stick, so you can play Bubsy on the Jaguar.
There you go. Right. Just throw that title on underneath. That'll sell it. Yeah. So, but yeah, so those are kind of the things that I just kind of had going on, and I guess if you want to just do a close up, I'll actually show the in person here. So yeah, you can kind of see that there in all of its glory.
Does look good. Does look good.
So
I like it a lot.
So yeah, those are the things I kind of had. I apologize because I know we went way over tonight than we normally do.
Way over, yeah.
It's all right.
But you know what? For the lineup that you had for us today, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
that's why when people kept coming to the table, they were always asking. They were inquisitive, asking what this is, that is, how much is this, how much is that, and there are so many options. And I'm like, oh, I have to look because I didn't know. It just it was just an amazing thing to behold, to be right there in person. Like I said, I actually helped him at Torx, but it seemed like his table was even bigger at Quargs than it was at Torx. I don't remember
It
you having
was.
this
I
much.
mean, my table was the biggest yet this year. I mean,
and he had the best spot too, I thought, at the whole gaming convention. As soon as you go in the main entrance, just to the left against the wall, he's right there as you come in. It's one of the first tables you saw, and I'm like, oh man, yeah, look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, man, just wonderful. And
yeah, so to answer your question, Volk, my favorite retro controller, like official ones, I still go back to the Sega Genesis 6 button. I really like that one a lot. Like, I think they did a lot right with that. But that's probably one of my more favorite original controllers.
It is not the best controller by any stretch, but this thing is ingrained in my muscle memory. Like that, and that's why I understand why people like the dog bone. But I cannot play NES without one of these, and not even one of the aftermarket ones because they're too light. They don't feel right. It has to be an original OEM NES controller.
Now, what about the wireless NES from Nintendo for the Switch?
That one is not bad. It is not bad. It is as close as any non. Yeah, it's as close as you're going to get.
Yeah, and again, I agree. Well, because you think about it, what we had prior to that, right? I mean, when you look at the mess of the second gen console controllers, of just like they were so afraid of microcomputers that they felt they had to put all this extra stuff on these controllers, and then Nintendo was just like, nope, we're just going back to the roots. We're just going to add one extra button. I mean, in this one extra action button, I would say, because of course, obviously, that's select and start for it, but like I said, where I like the Sega Genesis was just they really tried to put an arcade style feel in your hand. You know what I mean? Whenever it came to
with the 6 button, yeah. But with Genesis, again, because my cousin had a Sega Genesis, it was a Model 1, only ever had the 3-button controllers. I find it so weird playing Genesis with a 6-button controller. It's just nostalgic muscle memory. That's all it is.
See, for me, it was honestly, if I'm being honest, the Super Nintendo, and Mike was making fun of me about the way I was holding, but if you're using the
Super Nintendo, buttons, you hold like that.
That's how I played. That's how I learned to hold it that
Super
way.
Nintendo controller is arguably one of the best controllers of all time. It just we can talk about controllers on another episode because we are way over now. But I have videos to make.
But so I guess with that, I mean, do you guys have any closing things? Because I've definitely talked enough tonight. So,
well, all I know is that I need a pole vault to get out of my office now. I don't know if I can get out with all this stuff that I got going on here, but I wouldn't have them if I didn't use them or if I didn't like them. You don't just buy them to put on a shelf. You buy them to use them. I know that Casey has them on a shelf, but they're not just there to look pretty. He uses them.
Yeah, so, that's just for tonight.
That's just for tonight. So, and I know that Mike, when he got his Coleco Vision controller, that's one of the first things that he did was use it, and he's done nothing but rave about that one.
There is a reason it made the intro of my first ColecoVision review for like this year.
My point exactly. And even Dr. Scott, who's been in the chat, I mean, that was one of the first things that caught my eye with him when I first met him was his video that he did a review of one of your controllers. So, people love your controllers, Brian, and we brought this up at the beginning of the video. I know you're not making bank at this because this is not your job. This is you had mentioned this is something that you told me at the beginning that you were trying to help keep retro gaming more viable and keep it going for the masses as much as possible.
Right, and that's still the case. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, this is just a hobby side thing of mine. Like, I'm not, like Phil said, I mean, I'm not making big bank on this or anything. Again, I try to price things fairly, because obviously I got to factor my time into making it. But again, none of my stuff I feel is overly expensive for what it is, especially when you look at some other options out there. And again, and I purposely do that because I want people to be able to get them and enjoy their consoles. Because at the end of the day, if it's my product or someone else's product, I mean, I just want people to keep enjoying retro gaming, because the reality is that a lot of these consoles, they're hitting 40 plus years old, and these controllers that have the original controllers just don't work like they used to, or you can't necessarily find replacement parts to fix those controllers. So, this is a way to help keep being able to use, your retro consoles by having some more modern controllers that'll last a while. So, but again, if my stuff's not your thing, there's other options out there. There's obviously the original stuff, if you can find it in working condition. And at the end of the day, I just want people to keep playing retro games and enjoying them. So
on that note, I think we'll end the show. I appreciate you guys being here. You guys, Mike and Brian, are regular panelists anyway, and I appreciate you guys being part of the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. And Casey, he's been a regular guest on the show, and I appreciate you being here and giving us your insight. So you're a very, very regular customer as well. So
and he has a big list for me. I got to go through it.
It just got a lot longer tonight, Brian.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh jeez!
Maybe he didn't realize everything you had until tonight, huh? Okay.
Some of those are probably already on there.
Not only are your kids getting paid to go through college, you're getting a new car.
All right, guys. All right. Well, you guys have an awesome day. We'll see you next week on Retro Bliss Rewind. Take care.
Night, everyone.
Bye.